page 114. Help us. For several long days and nights, the nuns and the Muzabi fought to keep Malbro alive. But at last, he was claimed by the nightmarish illness. Surrounded by her children and helped by her family members and neighbors, Maza began preparing her husband's body for the funeral. Together, the group carefully washed the body, sponging away the thick crusted blood. They would sit with the body all day and all night before carrying Malbro to his grave just outside the family's hut. As the wails of mourners, bereavement through the hot, still air, the nuns gathered in prayer in the mission's tiny church, felt a sense of relief. Malbro's terrifying illness was over. Life could return to normal in the village and the mission. But a few days later, everyone began getting sick. Malbro's wife, his oldest daughter, his mother, his sister, and his mother-in-law were the first to come to the mission clinic, suffering from fever, headaches, vomiting, and diarrhea. More followed. Within days, 21 people who had attended Malbro's funeral were showing symptoms of the same violent illness. Others in the village and throughout the surrounding areas were falling ill as well. The nuns, with their limited knowledge of medical procedures and scarcity supplies, struggled to comfort the dying. Then they too began dying. Sister Bedita was among the first. In the mission office, Sister Makela, the Mother Superior, hunched over the shortwave radio, sending out message after message to the outside world, pleading for help. The fever was spreading fast, and it killed almost every person it touched, young or old, healthy or frail. For the nuns, for the grieving families, for the village numb with fear, there were so many questions. What was causing this terrible disease? Why did it choose to strike their village? How was it being spread? How could the living protect themselves from the killer? A microscopic question mark. As the 1st October dawned in Yomi, the epidemic was in its 3rd week. Already well over 100 people were dead. Alerted by Sister Makela's calls for help, doctors from Zaire's capital city, Kenesha, arrived to collect blood samples that they would analyze to try to identify the mystery illness. There were no longer enough living staff at the mission to care for the sick and dying. Sister Miracle sent the remaining patients home and ordered the mission gates to be chained shut. The nuns gathered together in the chapel to pray and wait for death. With no clinic to care for the sick, fevered patients were taken to the neighboring village to be cared for by family members, spreading the infection throughout the region. Village elders warned people to stay home. Schools and shops closed. Social gatherings were discouraged, and trees were felled to block the roads, preventing travel between villages. Almost overnight, the epidemic zone became a network of ghost towns. Meanwhile, the blood and tissue samples that Kensha doctor had collected were being studied around the globe. Scientists were peering into microscopes and realizing with a jolt of fear and excitement that they were looking at a virus that had never been seen before. In Belgium, 27-year-old Peter Pilot, a researcher in microbiology lab at the Prince Leopard Institute of Tropical Medicine, was one of the first to look down the barrel of the microscope at the virus. He soon realized the mysterious microbes were lethal. Laboratory mice injected with tiny amounts died within days. Dr. Zaire had suspected the disease might be related to yellow fever, but all the antibodies tests were coming up negative. With its curved, whip-like tail, Peter thought the virus looked like a question mark. A question mark taunted him and his colleagues. When the director of the institute told Peter that the World Health Organization, or the WHO, would send out an international team of scientists to Zaire, Peter didn't ask to go. He demanded to be sent to Belgium's representatives. The deadly virus was a question, and he was determined to find answers. On the hunt, days later, sitting on a flight to Keisha, Peter started to wonder what he had gotten himself into. Seated next to him was a Belgian diplomat who was furious that the inexperienced young doctor was part of the team fighting this mysterious killer disease. Intolerable. You're facing a terrible epidemic, and all you could find is you. How old are you? 27? You're totally green. You're barely even a doctor. You've never seen Africa in your life. Taxi ride from the airport through Kensha didn't help to calm his growing nerves. Everywhere he looked, there were throngs of people, and sticky heat and humidity had him panting. He'd hardly been out of Belgium before, and never anywhere as unfamiliar as this city. Had been foolish to sign up for this mission. The hastily assembled group of scientists knew they needed more information. They decided to send a scouting team to Yonkers to investigate the epidemic and trying to find out how it was spreading, who would be volunteer. Before the question was even finished, Peter had his hand up. Page 17, meet the microbe. Watch out, I've got a nasty virus. You don't want to catch it. We've all heard that before, but what exactly are viruses? A virus is a type of microbe or single-celled organism. Microbes are the oldest and most numerous life forms on Earth, and they are essential to human life. There are several types of microbes, including bacteria, fungi, viruses, and the lesser-known archaea and protista. Without microbes, we couldn't digest our food, breathe, or break down waste. But some microbes cause potentially lethal disease like Ebola. Viruses are the tiniest and in many ways the strangest of all the types of microbes. Scientists can't even agree whether viruses are alive until a virus comes into contact with a host cell. It is nothing more than a lifeless bundle of DNA. But once it makes contact with cells in your body, the virus springs to life, hijacking the cells and using them to reproduce itself and spread illnesses, from the common cold to AIDS to Ebola, are all caused by viruses. And many of the symptoms of viruses' illnesses, such as coughing, vomiting, diarrhea, help to spread the virus to a new host.